Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today for another HR Corner, this one on employee handbooks. I'm Steve Sillig, the moderator, director of the Small Business Development Center, headquartered at Kent State University, Tuscarawas. For those that are on the call and not familiar with our organization, confidential, no-cost assistance in areas such as marketing, food service, leadership, finance and accounting, QuickBooks and bookkeeping, and computer technology, trademark, intellectual property, and most importantly, HR, which is what we're covering today. So we have muted everybody for our speakers' benefit. If you have questions, please use the chat room. You can find that in the ribbon either below your screen or to the upper right-hand corner, and just hover over your mouse. It should say show conversation, and I'll do my best to monitor that throughout. This is a chat, so feel free to ask questions. This is a hands-on HR training. We're very pleased to have on the call today Joanna Forbes. Joanna has 20 years of experience in various industries, including healthcare, manufacturing, food and restaurant service, and nonprofits. She's a certified HR professional with the Society of Human Resource Management. Joanna owns and serves as the Chief HR Consultant for Forbes Human Resources, a local HR consulting firm which also serves as an HR advisor for the Small Business Development Center. And let me just share with you, we're so pleased to have her as one of our advisors, and she'll go through some information today, but feel free to take full advantage of her expertise ongoing. So if a question does not get answered or you want some direct assistance, she is available to assist you. That's done on a confidential, no-cost basis. So the session is being recorded. The slides will be emailed to you at the conclusion of the session, and probably within the next week to 2 weeks, this recording will be on our website. So if you need to review it again or share it with someone else, please take advantage of this. So at this time, I'll be happy to turn it over to Joanna.
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. Welcome everybody today to our HR Corner on employee handbooks. If this is your first HR Corner, we try to do these short, within 30 minutes, so everybody can get the information and take it right back to the workplace. So they're different than our usual webinars that are an hour. So we'll all be wrapped up here by 12:30. I always like to just remind people that the presentation is for informational purposes only. And I say that because, as we all know, things are changing daily, especially in terms of the coronavirus. So please refer to your specific industry's standards and regulations to stay compliant on all of our mandatory and recommended business practices. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So today, again, we are talking about employee handbooks. Now, the topic of employee handbooks can be quite daunting, and we could probably do a whole 8-hour workshop on employee handbooks alone, if not longer. So to say that we're going to wrap this up in 30 minutes seems difficult. So what I'm going to hit today, and here's our agenda today, we're going to talk about the policies that you need now. We're going to talk about some recommended policies, some common small business policies that I see come up a lot with our clients, just some common issues that I see. We're going to talk about some COVID policy updates that you need to have, and then some final reminders. And just again, to just reiterate what Steve said, all of the things that you see on here today, we can help you with at the SBDC. We can assist and we can review the policies that you have. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, what are employee handbooks? So I think that we all know what they are, but just so we can kind of picture it in our mind, it's a group of personnel policies and practices that all employees in management must follow. So the reason why I'm reading the definition is because sometimes, you know, we think that employee handbooks need to have all of the procedures and all of the checklists of things that our employees need to do throughout the day, and that is not really the case. We want to focus our employee handbooks on our personnel policies. And there is no definitive length or content or how many pages it needs to have. I've seen employee handbooks that are 8 pages long. I've seen employee handbooks that are 250 pages long. So the length and the content really depends on whatever your organization is, the size, the type, the industry, location, and many other factors. So there's really no right or wrong on your employee handbook size. Okay, so here are some things that all employee handbooks should have though. So employee handbooks they need to be written keeping in mind that your employees are the intended audience. And I say that because sometimes some of our businesses have all types of employees, all levels of employees. And we need to remember that all different types of people are reading this, not the managers, but that the employees need to be able to read the employee handbook and understand it. So those employee handbooks should also have a straightforward layout for easy referencing, because the last thing you want is for an employee to not even be able to go through the handbook because they're so frustrated with the layout, because that's what you're going to hear. Well, I couldn't even find the vacation policy. You know, it was hidden at the bottom on page 98. So we want to have a straightforward layout. In really employee handbooks, they should familiarize your employees with basic company policies. Again, it shouldn't be long procedures. That's not the place for the employee handbook. The benefit programs, as well as outlining those just general expectations of your company, including acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And really, the handbook should set the tone for a productive, respectful work environment. Okay, so this is important, okay? Employee handbooks are only as effective as the management that does or does not follow it, okay? So what do we mean by that? In other words, if the policies are written, but no one knows about them or follows them, then it might as well not even exist. And this happens, and that's okay. We're gonna talk about that today, because what we do is we know we have to have an employee handbook. So we have somebody write one for us at some point, and then we put it on the shelf. We're like, ooh, we got that done. And then we kind of forget about it, and because we don't really have any issues. And then we're moving along and everything's fine. And then, oops, 5 years goes past and now we have an issue. So we really can't then say, let's go look at our policy and start following it. If the employee never saw it, if you weren't following it consistently before, so it might as well not even exist. You want your handbook to be a part of your culture of your business. Everyone needs to know it exists, and all managers need to follow it consistently. So that's very important. It's only as effective as the folks that are using it. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. So first and foremost, your employee handbook must document that the company is compliant with all federal, state, and local labor laws and regulations. So you want to actually have that written in your handbook right there in the very beginning. Now, so I also recommend to, whenever I'm reviewing our clients' employees' handbooks, I always say have a line in there that says, under a line like this, that says something to the effect that laws may change before this handbook is updated, because the reality is that you can't just constantly be printing off a handbook, every time. So we will still follow the federal, state, and local laws. And a great example of this is everything that happened this year when the government put into place the FFCRA, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. People weren't worried about updating that employee handbook and everything. They knew they needed to start following it ASAP for those companies that had to. So there's an example. So you want to make sure you're documenting that your company is compliant with it, even if something changes before you can update that handbook. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to list the things that all employee handbooks should have. So regardless of size, if there is a size such as what we see on the slide here, I will mark that. But all handbooks should have these things we're going to go over now. First and foremost, that you're an equal employment opportunity employer, okay? And we've seen that over and over again. We always see that on ads and in other things. And in hand with that is your anti-harassment and sexual harassment and non-discrimination policies, that you do not discriminate against, and where you'll list the protected classes, and that you have a zero tolerance harassment policy at your workplace. So these are things that all workplaces should have regardless of employer size. Again, if you need assistance on any of this, please reach out to us. Or if you just want us to review what you already have. You want to say that you're compliant with the ADA, with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you're going to have this in your handbook, which basically is going to say that if you have an employer or an applicant that discloses that they have a disability, that you will make accommodations per the policy. And if anybody on the call today has more than 50 employees, that you will follow, of course, the Family and Medical Leave Act. Okay, again, continuing with what all employee handbooks should have. So you definitely want to say that you are an at-will employer. In the state of Ohio, we are all at-will employers, and that the handbook is not a contract for employment. And it just as a reminder, what that means is that at any point you can terminate an employee for any reason, and that employee can leave the workplace at any point as well. So we want to have that statement in our employee handbook for sure. Okay, we also want to have in there if employees feel like they need to file a complaint about any sort of safety issue, ethical dilemma at their workplace. And we're going to have that in our handbook as well, and that they will not be retaliated against. That's important to have in the handbook as well. And then lastly, you want to have that employee acknowledgement form, which we're going to get into a little bit here at the end of the nuts and bolts of an employee acknowledgement form. So those policies that we just covered are ones that all handbooks should have. Again, depending on your size, it may be a 2-sentence policy. It may be a 1-page policy. All are different. No right or wrong as long as you're following it. Okay, now you're probably thinking, well, that wasn't very many policies, right? So here are the list of all of the other ones that I would highly recommend, okay? So because it just helps you. An exempt, non-exempt schedule. And I don't mean you have to list in there, this person works 7 to 3, that type of thing, but just some general information. Breaks is a big one. That comes up a lot with our clients. You might want to outline what your break policy is and how time tracking is. Your payroll procedures. Typically in an employee handbook, you will see that we get paid bi-weekly or something like that. When timesheets need to be in, they need to be in by Friday at 4 o'clock, things like that, because you may have to reference these procedures if you have an employee that's consistently not doing what they need to do to get paid properly. The benefits overview and who's eligible for those benefits. Basic standards of conduct, which you expect, which usually goes hand in hand with some sort of progressive discipline policy. Now, the progressive discipline policy, a lot of times we work with many clients who never have to use this. They have maybe 5 employees, they're quite small, everybody is doing what they're supposed to do, frankly, and doing a great job. But what always happens is eventually we may have somebody who doesn't. And again, your progressive discipline policy might be, 4 sentences, 1 paragraph, or I've seen discipline policies that are pages and pages. Again, as long as it's something that you're going to follow and you're going to follow consistently. Policies such as equipment usage, or employees aren't permitted to take equipment home. And if they do, what's the policy on returning it? Confidentiality policy. I see this a lot with food service, if there's trade secrets, if the company that you have produces a product where there will be confidential information, you want to have something like that in there as well. Social media policy. Of course, this one is newer in terms of workplace policies. The National Labor Relations Board has been vocal that employees are allowed to complain per se about the workplace, but you might want to have a policy that just mentions that they cannot speak on the workplace's behalf on their personal social media pages. That would be something that you might want to do. Again, may never come up and not even worth it at your place. And any other company specific policies and information that would be specific to you that you see as something that routinely comes up that you think, I think we need to get this written down. And pretty much if you find that you're having the same conversation over and over and you're trying to explain something, that's when I'm thinking we might need a policy on this. So just some common policies that I see a lot with our clients at the SBDC, dress code. So this one comes up a lot because not for so much our employers that have people kind of working in the back. Like if you're working in a manufacturing environment where those folks are never seen by customers, and it's like jeans and t-shirts, we don't care what's on the t-shirt as long as everybody's dressed, then this may never come up. But if you look at the picture on the left, here's an example of a business where it's important that people follow some sort of dress code. And what typically happens is, again, everything's moving along fine. And then, maybe there's some inappropriate clothing that starts coming in. So it's like, gosh, I've warned such and so several times, and now we might need a dress code. So that comes up a lot. Cell phone policy. This one is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we're so attached to our phones. And the reality is that people have them on them all the time. So I always tell clients, make it a safety thing, because people cannot follow safety procedures or a customer service issue if they're on their phones. So you might need to document when people can look at their phones, when they can make calls, and where they need to keep them. So you can see in our picture here, the stylist has her phone in the back pocket. So is that something that we're allowed to do or not? So those are some decisions that you may need to make. Parking, this sounds silly, but a lot of times our small businesses are right in town somewhere, and you want your employees to maybe park around the corner. You want to leave those spots right out front for potential customers. We don't want to block the street with all that great parking out there. So that might be something that you might have. Personal belongings. Space, may be small at a small business of where we can keep things. So you might need to document that employees shouldn't bring in expensive things and where they need to keep their purses and things like that for safety reasons. So these are just some common things that I see come up every once in a while with our smaller businesses at the SBDC. So let's talk about COVID for a minute. So I just said earlier that we can't always just update our handbook, at a drop of a hat every time something changes. But right now, at the end of 2020, is a great time to look at that handbook and to add the things that have come up this last year for 2021. It's always a great time to give a new employee handbook at the beginning of a year. It does not matter when you do it, but right now would be a great time. So, and then there you go. So here's some things that have changed. The leave of absence with the Family First Coronavirus Response Act was added. Scheduling and time off. If you had a strict time off or call off policy, 3 and you're out or whichever, that's probably been pretty lenient, since the spring, because we just can't follow that anymore with everything that's going on. Schools closing, daycares closing, people getting sick, having to take care of somebody that is sick. So those policies have changed quite a bit. Training. When employees may need to cross-train a little bit more than they had to before, because we're all kind of covering for each other. The remote work policy. For those of you on the phone that are maybe working from home for the first time, I just had a client not that long ago said, am I allowed to say when I expect them to answer emails or when I expect them to be online? Yes, absolutely. We can do those things. So you want to just make sure you have those expectations outlined. IT. People are using laptops at home that maybe they never had to use before. So you want to have an IT policy on that. And of course, the safety procedures, the mask, the social distancing, the hand hygiene, all of the things that we had to put in place because of COVID. You maybe never even had a safety policy before in terms of employee safety in that regard, and now we do. And then layoff recall procedures. If anybody on the call today came to our COVID webinars that we had a couple over the summer, I talked about making sure that you have some sort of policy in place whenever you're recalling your employees, and we're not just, willy-nilly bringing people back here and there, that we actually have a rhyme or reason of why we're doing that. So you want to make sure maybe you get that documented at this point and really think about, if this ever happens again, how we would want to lay off and recall our employees, what worked and what didn't work. So these are some policies that you might want to think about including because of COVID-19. And again, the employee handbook, I always recommend, and when I assist our clients with creating handbooks from scratch, I always tell them, put in your company mission, vision, history, timeline. What's the story of your company? The logo, put all of that in the front. Again, when you're giving this to an employee on their first day, again, it's a reminder of what they're actually contributing to. So I always recommend having your company information right there in the front of your handbook. Okay, the employee acknowledgement. So this is very important. Have the employee sign it upon hire and anytime there's an update or an addition to the handbook, because it really demonstrates that not only the employee received it, but that they're responsible for knowing it. This is what comes into play if there's ever any sort of legal dispute or workplace claim where an employee says, I didn't know about that, or I didn't receive that, or I didn't know that was a policy. This is your proof right here. So make sure, this is so important, if you're going to have any type of handbook, even if it's a 5-pager, that you have some sort of acknowledgement that your employee signed it. So here's our final reminders today. So you want to review your handbook annually if you can. Have some sort of your reminder on your calendar to at least look at it. Things may change not only with workplace laws, but at your business. There may be things in there that don't even exist anymore that you need to get rid of or you need to add. If you have a handbook, use it. Be consistent in following all of the policies and make sure all of the managers that are responsible for following it, that they're all doing it consistently and not doing something than the other. And it's never too late to create or start using one. If you have that handbook sitting there and you have not looked at it in 10 years, that's okay. Take it off the shelf, look at it. We can help you with that at the SBDC. Review it and see what needs updated and see what needs changed. That's okay. It's never too late to start one. So just before I get to Steve to see if we have any questions, I just want to remind everybody our next HR Corner is on Tuesday, December 8th, and it's our last one of 2020, and we're going to be talking about performance evaluations. So at this point, I'm going to send it back to Steve to see if we have any questions.
Okay, Joanne. I'm always amazed. We got an echo. Always amazed that it's a difficult to make it manageable.
Oh, thank you. I try.
Are you hearing my echo?
I'm hearing you. I hear a little bit of an echo, but I can hear you.
So what if the employee refuses to sign the acknowledgement? What are their options, the employer's options?
Okay, that's a good one. And this also comes up with when employees refuse to maybe sign a discipline or a corrective action. So if they get the handbook and they say, oh, I'm not signing this, you're trying to make things too difficult here, which comes up a lot. That's okay. You have a couple options. One, and this is the more strict one, you could make it a condition of employment. So you could say, if an employee does not sign the employee handbook, that they're terminated. It's a condition of employment. That would be pretty extreme, but I've seen it before. The other thing you could do is just simply write on the line, employee refused to sign, have a witness, and sign it. If anything ever came up with this employee where they said, I never got that, I've never seen that, that's at least your documentation that you went over it with them, but they refused to sign it. Those are pretty much your two options.
Okay. Question number 2, outside of the pandemic, COVID-19, is there a good time of the year to review your handbook that you catch most of the changes from the DOL or other agencies?
I would always just say the beginning of the year, because that's typically when minimum wages would go up and that type of thing. So around, the end of the year, start thinking about when you get back to work after Christmas, you can see changed and then get that updated for your employees.
Excellent. I assume the non-compete, the non-solicitation that I was required to sign over the years, is that a document outside of the handbook that's not generally put in the handbook? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And no reference to it in the handbook. It should be just treated separately.
Yeah, that would be treated separately.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. And then this comes up often, your opinion of printed handbook versus the online version.
It's all about what your company culture is. If you're a manufacturing environment and you have 50 people out on the plant floor who don't even have access to email through work, I mean, when I say email, then you're going to want to give them a hard copy. If you're a company where everybody's online, you have an intranet that employees can easily access throughout the day, then online is fine. But I would still get that printed acknowledgement with the signature for their personnel file.
Excellent, excellent. And we do have one of our attendees that sent a separate email specifically asking for your help. So I'll send that information on to you after the call. But for the other attendees, please feel free. Joanna does a fabulous job of providing the kind of information you need and can really make this a useful document. And that's what it's all about.
Correct, right. Absolutely.
Okay. That's all the questions we had. I don't see anything in the chat room. I first of all want to thank the attendees and thank Joanna for her time and experience that she shared today. And hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks for the employee performance program.
Okay, thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.